the International Boat Show actually happening, one of the events that's actually going to happen. Tell us what it's taken to get that event to happen, and a little bit more what the process is going to be this year.
Well, when COVID first came to Fort Lauderdale, we were all very afraid of what its impact would be, and rightly so. People were dying, people were getting very sick, we were getting mixed signals from the national and state authorities, and we ended up shutting down our city like every city around the country. But as we realized, COVID was not going away, the pandemic was still with us. So we had to come up with ways to see how we could coexist with the disease without putting people's lives at risk. And we slowly opened up. We had essential services, such as grocery stores and drugstores. People were starting to repopulate their offices. I know City Hall slowly opened up. I was attending meetings myself, always in a very safe fashion. And then events were starting to materialize, and events for which we are very famous and very popular, such as the boat parade. But the boat parade decided that they did not want to put people at risk, so that organization decided not to hold it this year. Tortuga Festival, same thing. People just felt the proximity to one another was going to put people at risk, and they did not want to be a part of that. But the boat show folks came to us, they came to the county, and they said, we really feel we can do it in a safe way. And there's some important decisions that had to be made. First of all, what does a safe way mean? They came back to us with almost 50 pages of protocols that they were going to follow in order to ensure the safety of people, reduce the number of people that could attend, try to limit it to mostly the people who are interested in boats, buying and selling, not just boats, but boat components and things like that. And it was at this point that we realized that not only do we have to worry about the safety of people and their lives, but also the livelihoods of people. We're not just talking about big boat owners, we're talking about the workers associated with this event. Thousands of people's jobs are associated with this event. And so we decided, along with the county, to see if we could find a safe way in which to host this boat show this year. And I think we're going to be successful at that. I think that we've come up with a way, and I think it's been very visible in other events that we've had. First of all, we were told to shut the beaches down forever because those are super spreader events, but we realized that that's not the case. We opened up the beaches even for Labor Day weekend, and ever since then the infection rate has gone down. So we can coexist with this disease if we do it safely, if we wear masks, if we keep our distance and wash our hands and all the things that the CDC tells us to do. And so we agreed with the county to allow the boat show to go forward, and I'm sure we're going to see a very successful event, both in terms of keeping people in their jobs and also keeping people safe from this disease.
You mentioned the beaches were closed. That goes to the county has a big say in that, and it's been reported in the Sun Sentinel that a lot of the leaders in the county, in the city leaders, were kind of butting heads with the county administration. And a lot of residents are worried that an unknown administrator is really making the decisions instead of elected officials. What did you learn in this process? Because I know Fort Lauderdale was really trying to make that balance to help the businesses and the workers reopen safely, whereas people thought the county was trying to stop that. What have you learned about the process, especially going forward with maybe another pandemic or a hurricane? How can you make sure that the concerns of your city is being heard by an administrator in the county?
We've had disagreements with the county. There's no doubt about that. But it's not like we are loggerheads with one another. We are still trying to find best practices. We all have the people's best interests at heart, and we're all trying to figure out how we can move forward. So when it came to the beaches, we actually didn't wait for the county. Back in March 15th to be exact, we were the first city in the entire country, along with Miami Beach. We partnered in closing down spring break because we knew we had to take action. No one else was taking action. The governor wasn't moving ahead. The county wasn't thinking it even had the authority to move ahead. And so we decided to go ahead, and that began the process of trying to find best practices in order to keep people safe in our community. You know, in early March, we had people dying from this pandemic. It started in our convalescent homes, but it certainly spread to other places. I've had friends who have passed away. It's very, very sad, and people younger than me. And it was really an awakening. But I'll tell you, it has actually created a bond between us and the county administration, because we developed a working relationship that before, as you know, the city and the county have always been at odds with each other. But in these trying times, the best of us has been able to come out. And I think that going forward, this will create a nice platform for us to discuss other issues that we're going to collaborate on. And we got to know each other better. And I have to thank the folks at the county, as well as the governor's office, who really reached out to me personally and to others in our administration in trying to find out how we can best help, the city of Fort Lauderdale. If it wasn't for the governor's office, we would not have these testing sites in Fort Lauderdale. If it wasn't for the governor, we would not have had that field hospital that was set up early on in this pandemic. So it's important to maintain relationships. Let's put aside, party affiliations for the moment when people's health is at risk. We need to collaborate and do the best thing for what's important to the community. And I think that's the relationship we now build with the county.
Speaking of the governor, the state, the fines with the sewer, you had a month span there where making national, international news about the sewer breaks. The state comes back with a fine, and then they come back and say, look, there's a deal. Instead of just writing us a check, you can use that money to put towards the cleanup. Where do we stand right now with replacing the sewers? Where do you see the process going into next year? When can residents kind of be assured that it's not going to be a continuing thing? And then where do we stand on the cleanup efforts right now for some of the areas that are affected?
Okay, well, there's not one neighborhood on the east side that isn't being impacted by the sewer replacement program we have going on. This is a fast forward replacement program. What we're doing is we're installing a 7.5 mile force mains that leads to the George Bollmeyer treatment plant. And I drove through Rio Vista last night, and most of that construction is completed there. Coley Hammock areas around the Coral Ridge neighborhood is also areas are being completed. My own neighborhood, Poinciana Heights, the pipes are still on 18th Street but ready to go in the ground. So I applaud our staff now that's finally moving forward aggressively and getting the job done. And it's not only getting the job done, it's getting a job done under budget as well as ahead of schedule. And this is just part of the 150 infrastructure projects that we have currently undertaken by the city to try to redress the neglect and the indifference that took place in the city years before. It's very sad because in the previous administration, I would often question decisions that were being made. And I would say, why don't we spend money on this? Why aren't we repairing our water treatment plant? Everyone's complaining about the yellow water. Why do we keep taking money out of the water and sewer fund every year to balance the budget? And when the new commission took office, and we still had the old city manager, we said, well, we want to stop the practice of this, what they call ROI, return on investment, where we're taking $20 million a year out of the water and sewer fund. And we said, let's apply that towards the reconstruction of the infrastructure that we have underground. And his answer was, if you start to do that, not only will I not be able to balance the budget, but I wouldn't know where to spend it anyway. So in his head, we didn't even have this crisis looming over our head. So this commission, while it was committed to working to change the infrastructure that we had a city management that refused to acknowledge the fact that we had a problem. And of course, after the first year, he was let go, and we have a new administration. And it was then, which would be the beginning of 2019, that the process began to try to rehabilitate the infrastructure. Because before, we were stonewalled, and we're told there isn't a problem. Even though we had a huge sewage break in Tarpon River the year before, and for some reason that administration just was oblivious to the fact that this, the brittleness of our infrastructure was rampant throughout the community. So, and what really bothered me was this $20 million we were taking out every year. You know, the state came back and said, you know, you've got 10 years to comply with this consent order that we're making you sign. And within that consent order, you have to undertake all of these reparation projects. And if you don't do it, we're going to fine you. So we had 10 years and 10 years of projects in which to rehabilitate the infrastructure. And it was going to cost $20 million to do it, $200 million to do it. It's a lot of money. So the city manager proposed borrowing the $200 million. And I said, why are we borrowing the money? We have the money. If you stop taking out the ROI, if you stop taking out the $20 million every year, over 10 years, you have your $200 million. So I voted against borrowing the money. I said, let's fast forward the projects, but we have the money, let's use the money we have, and why are we there taxing people more than we should? So a 4-1 vote, I lost, and we ended up borrowing the money. So for those that think that, you know, attempts have not been made in the past to try to change the course of our infrastructure undertakings, there's a history there, and I feel that I'm pleased to be able to work with a commission that now gets it, and we have an administration that is now undertaking it. So to answer your other question regarding the fine, so the state levied a fine against the city. We were able to convince the state to allow us to convert that fine into a remediation project. But we had to spend 1.5 times the amount of the fine. On Tuesday, we authorized the beginning of a remediation project, which is basically going to dredge the bottom of the Tarpon River to remove whatever sediment was left there from these sewage break and continue with remediation. But remediation doesn't just stop there. It's not just remediation. We have to talk about restoration. Restoring these waterways to where wildlife can return, marine life, plant life, everything can return to these waterways that existed years and years ago, which is why people came to Fort Lauderdale. So once we do the remediation, we have to then go into another phase, which is called restoration, and that's above and beyond what the state expects from us. It's what we need to do as a community, and that's what we're committed to do going forward. Yeah, we are prepared to move forward aggressively on that. The city, now that we've passed the new budget, the city manager has been authorized and directed to, first of all, engage a testing company, a water testing company. Instead of testing the water 4 times a year, we're going to do it 4 times a month. And this will allow us to constantly know the quality of our water on a real-time basis. And that's important, to see what progress we're making, to see which shortcomings are still are ahead of us. So that's the first step. Secondly, the city manager is now interviewing companies that with new technologies. I've met with several of them, and these new technologies are designed to help skim the waters, help purify the waters, which in turn will allow oxygen to return to the waterways and allow wildlife and marine life to return to the areas. So it's a multi-phase process. It's going to take a number of years, but at least we're starting the process. At least we're getting it going, and those will be fast-tracked. And because to me, water is the lifeblood of Fort Lauderdale. We are the Venice of America, and we will continue to find ways to improve our waterways every year.
You mentioned the infrastructure. That leads into the other part of that component is the development. A lot of people say overdevelopment caused the infrastructure to fail sooner than it should have. There's an element in the populace that hates development, period. They would knock down everything, leave it parks and clear view from 95 to the beach. But there are people who are seriously concerned, who are, even developers are worried about the pace of development. And then they bring up that you have the support of a lot of developers and lobbyists, and they worry that you're not going to address those issues. But in the past, you have mentioned that you do have concerns of development. How are you going to balance that while you do get the infrastructure fixed? How does Fort Lauderdale keep growing without creating a burden that you're just going to have to keep catching up to?
Well, in the last 10 years, the commission has voted for a lot of new development. But what they failed to tell the developers is, by the way, everything underneath is going to crumble. And that was the dirty secret of the city. Nothing was being done in a pace that was keeping up with the amount of development. So the commission and sometimes these projects didn't even come to the commission. They were just approved by staff level. The staff was approving a lot of these projects that you see, especially in the downtown area, without recognizing the fact that what's underneath was also had to be improved upon, and we weren't doing it. All they were talking about was whether or not we had the capacity at our water treatment plant and our water sewage plant to take on these new buildings. Well, that's great, but you got to get from the building to the treatment plant, and when you have all of this brittle infrastructure that's sitting underground, the city was not doing its job. So I've always been an advocate of slower development. Many of the projects on the beach and many of the projects in downtown, we've done our best to try to push back. The Lexington project was one example right by the tunnel, which has gone to litigation, and we've actually succeeded in that matter. We also have other projects that have come before us that I have voted against. The ones that I find most important that we try to support are the lower income and the affordable housing projects that we have built in our city. These are the types of things that we need to still focus on. But market rate housing is still going to be built in our city, and it behooves us as a community that if we're going to continue this trend, we have to, our side of the job is to make sure the infrastructure is there. And it's not just infrastructure underground. It's sidewalks, it's lighting, making sure we have enough police and fire facilities to accommodate the new population. There's a lot of moving parts here. And we as a city have a duty, if we're going to allow this development to continue, that we do so in a responsible way. There are pump stations, there are all kinds of new construction taking place underground that is trying to keep pace, but as you know, it got ahead of us. And look what happened in Rio Vista. Look what happened in Coral Ridge. It definitely got ahead of us. Why the previous administration did not think that we needed to pay attention to this. You should go and see what the pipe looked like that broke in December of last year. It was a micro thin wall that was so brittle that I just can't imagine how it lasted as long as it did. It was corroded because of rising sea level and the penetration of salt water into our underground areas. It was made out of cast iron. Certainly not a material that could anyway survive the elements that we have today. So I don't know where people's heads were at the time, but certainly we ignored a problem, and we're now dealing with it. And I think we're doing our best to try to catch up and make sure we're able to deal with the new development that's taking place.
And you mentioned housing. Affordable housing is a big topic everywhere. Brings up AIDS Healthcare Foundation, AHF, and their plans to build a tower full of micro units. Got a lot of people in Rio Vista and throughout the city angry. Project was on the agenda tonight, but then it was off. Where does that project stand, and are you still firm in your questioning of the propriety of that plan?
Originally, when AIDS Healthcare Foundation proposed an affordable housing project, no one really knew what it looked like, and nobody really knew how it was going to operate. And then they came to us. First of all, when someone comes to our city and says we want to build an affordable housing project, we're eager to see it happen. And we've developed over 2,000 units in the last decade in our downtown core area that are deemed affordable housing. Over 21% of our downtown housing market is considered affordable. So when another developer comes to us and says, we want to build an affordable housing project, we're eager to see what they have to say. So when they came to us, it was not quite what we thought we were going to get. The micro units, of course, were quite a shock to think that someone was going to live in a 250 square foot unit. But some would say, hey, it's either the street or it's in a hotel room. Which is worse. So we'll have a discussion on the size of units. But more importantly, we were more concerned about how this building was really going to be, how it was going to be operated, and how it was going to be used. Was it just an affordable housing project, or was it going to be programmed for something more than that? And our city attorney took a look at it. They looked at their website, they looked at their advertising materials, and it turned out that this was more than just an affordable housing project. This was actually going to be a medical center. It was going to be a place where people were going to have treatment, and it was going to coexist and be an appendage to their health services operation across the street. So that suddenly triggered the idea that this was actually a social service facility, and for that reason, it's not zoned properly for that. So the city attorney wrote an opinion, and because it's being deemed as an SSRF, a social service residential facility, then it was appropriate for that area. They took it to the Board of Adjustment. The Board of Adjustment agreed with the city attorney. They take it to court. The court has also rejected AHF's claim. And so, we have to respect our zoning laws. The zoning laws were put there for a reason. And it's not just that it was close to Rio Vista, it's just that it was inappropriately placed. We would love to see AHF build an affordable housing project in Fort Lauderdale. It's just not in the right location. And there will also be a question as to the minimum size of units. We feel that it's just not habitable to have such a small unit per person. So AIDS Healthcare Foundation asked us to, through a petition drive, where they secured 1,000 signatures in which to put before the commission whether or not they would allow an issue to come before the voters, which basically said that if an affordable housing project is proposed and it fits the zoning, that it can build as a matter of right. Well, we don't do things that way in the city. Yes, you have to comply with zoning, but you also have to talk about neighborhood compatibility. You have to talk about neighborhood input. We are a people-oriented city. People do not want to be shut out of the process, and I think it's important that we don't allow a developer to muscle their way into the city and think that they're going to be able to do whatever they want because it fits within their business plan. Well, our business plan, we're in the business of helping people. Yes, we're in the business of making sure that people don't live on the street, and if they're formerly homeless and they're trying to get themselves back on their feet and they need inexpensive housing, hey, we're all for that. But at the same time, we have to make sure that we don't interfere with the quality of life of neighboring communities to make sure that we are able to be there for as many people as possible. So I've met with AIDS Healthcare Foundation several times, trying to see if we could come to a compromise. But right now, the status is they're asking the commission to put this on a referendum. I don't know what the opinion of the community is going to be, or I should say of the commission. But I know that for myself, I don't see myself interested in approving that. I don't think that our hands should be tied as a commission or as a community, and any project that comes before the city should have neighborhood input.
A homeless issue, which is a little different than the affordable housing. Mm-hmm. Over the last 10 years, people in the city have tried everything from Arnold Abbott feeding at the beach to now recently trying to get them housing, and then even to put them up in a hotel in Dania Beach. and it hasn't worked. There's still people on the streets. There's still tents going up. Can the homeless issue be solved by the city when there isn't sufficient capacity in the mental health and substance abuse programs, which are not city programs? They're more on the county and state level. If they don't buy into helping, can the city really solve that problem?
Well, first of all, the homeless issue is not just the problem of the city of Fort Lauderdale. So you're correct. The city of Fort Lauderdale alone cannot solve the issue of homelessness. And I don't think any community can solve the issue of homelessness. I think the best we can do is hope that we can reduce it and try to help people out of homelessness as much as possible. During the COVID-19 crisis, a lot of things happened. First of all, the county shut its shelters to new occupants because they didn't want the spread of the virus to start to infiltrate these homeless shelters. So more and more people were starting to create these encampments around our city. This was not a good thing for them and not a good thing for the rest of the community. So we were able to secure funding that allowed us to put many of these people in temporary homes. In this case, there were hotels. We found 2 hotels that were willing to take homeless people. We paid them per room. We were able to secure food for these homeless folks. But more importantly, we were able to introduce them to case management so while they were living there, we were able to start to talk to them about what brought them to homelessness. Was it an addiction issue? Was it psychological issues? Was it simply employment issues? So by developing an aggressive case management program for each of these facilities, we were able to actually process people out of homelessness. We only had 2 months worth of money, so once the 2 months ran out, I know another organization stepped up to the plate and extended it for another month, but even they realized how significant the homeless problem is, and there wasn't enough money to take care of those folks. So the city of Fort Lauderdale has now received CARES Act funding, approximately $1 million, and it will be used to try to find permanent housing for homeless folks. It's not just going to be a quick, rapid rehousing program that we had during COVID, during the COVID summer months, but we now have secured funding and we're going to start aggressively trying to find housing. Now, the county still has the shelters closed off to future residents, but we are now using the testing facilities in Holiday Park, which are rapid testing. And the other good thing is that we've reopened the community court. By having the community court now processing homeless folks, they're tested before they come in, and if they're negative, then we put them through the homeless court processing, and we have representatives from Henderson Healthcare, we have the BARC, we have all kinds of representatives from the social services, and we're starting to process people off the street. And this is finally what's happening. And this way the county will now reopen some of its shelters, knowing that these folks now will not be infecting others that they may have before. Now, if you're testing positive, we also have a place where we put you into 14-day quarantine, treat you if you're really suffering from bad symptoms, and trying to ensure the health and safety of others in the community, and by keeping them isolated from the general population. So we're doing our best, but clearly COVID has thrown a lot of people out of work, especially marginal wage earners who were one paycheck away from homelessness, and we're doing our best to try to work with each and every one, the county and the city. But it's not just Fort Lauderdale; it's Hollywood and Pompano. I would love to see some of the western cities, help out a little bit, because what we're finding is that a lot of folks that end up on our streets aren't from Fort Lauderdale. They were from Coral Springs or Sunrise, and we have a program to reunite people with their families, we need to see more of that, because we don't want people putting their homeless folks on the streets of Fort Lauderdale.
Final thing.
Sure.
Nonpartisan office, it's a nonpartisan race, but it's no secret you're a longtime Democrat. You've been a delegate to the Democratic National Convention.
Busted.
There are a lot of younger candidates and politicians now in the Democratic Party running for these nonpartisan races, but they're very strong in their progressive beliefs. A lot of talk of defunding the police from some of them. Some people worry that they're too radical. What advice would you give those candidates who really don't have experience in working in a government? A lot of them are just out of college, or they're activists now. They have to be politicians. What would you tell them how to manage their new roles?
It's a really good question. When I was starting my early activism in the 90s, people thought I was a radical, and that my ideas were radical, and that there was no place for them in mainstream politics, because whoever heard of normalizing sexual orientation and making it a protected class. And today we so far advanced beyond that, and it goes to show you how cultural mores continue to evolve in our communities. So what you're hearing today is just more ideas, trying to improve society. The young people have their own progressive ideas, and I embrace their eagerness to want to see change in our community. And they may see me as, oh, you're the old guard, and you don't represent who we are today, but I do. And the thing is that now that I have a seat at the table and I'm at the head of the table, we have to learn to understand how important it is to include everybody, to exchange ideas from all the people in our community who have thoughts of what is better for how we should live day to day with our families, at work, in our neighborhoods. So no one philosophy or ideology should dominate. We're a very pluralistic society here in America. Fort Lauderdale is a very good microcosm of what America is all about. And I sit at the table with everybody. I sit at the table with business leaders, with neighborhood leaders, with people who are young and old, from all walks of life, different faiths, and different sexual orientations, to say the least. So, and that's my job as a mayor. My job as a mayor is to bring people together and not to divide them. And that's how I see my role, and that's why I feel young people coming into the political world now will hopefully see that as they start to get more and more responsibility. When they're elected to public office, they'll start to see how important it is to create coalitions rather than be strictly ideological.
Mayor Dean Trantalis, thank you.